And we are live. Hello, everyone. My name is Robin Bartoletti, and I'm from the Center for Innovative Learning. And we're here with Dr. Melissa Oden and Brian Hoff doing our very first Teach and Share. And the topic is getting your students to read using the 3-2-1 Purposeful Reading assignment. Before we get started talking to Dr. Oden, just a few housekeeping details. If you're watching this, you should have the Q&A app available to you. If you cannot see the Q&A app, I'm going to post a link in the questions area, and you will need to go to that. You'll need to go to that link in order to have the Q&A app turned on. Just 1 second. So you should be able to see the correct link if you don't see the Q&A app. The other thing to note is if you're watching through YouTube, you won't have the Q&A app available to you, but you will be able to see it on the recording that will be posted later. We are recording the broadcast, and we're going to post the broadcast with supplemental materials to the following website. I'm also going to post in the questions area. So after we are done with the session, you can just save that link and go watch the recording if you like and look at the supplemental information. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Oden and start off with our first question. Who are you? What do you teach and where? And just tell us what you would like us to know about yourself.
Well, sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Like Robin said, I'm Dr. Melissa Oden, and I am one of the adjunct instructors in the School of Public Health. I teach in the maternal and child health track, and I also serve as the public health practice liaison for students who are getting ready to do their public health practice experience. I help them find placement, and I also liaison between the school and our community partners and help them understand what they need to be doing with our students and help our students understand what they need to be doing in the field, and really enjoy that work. So that is what I do here.
Well, welcome, and thank you so much for taking time out from your very busy schedule to talk to us about this assignment that you use in your course. And I know when you first told me about it, I was really excited because I had other faculty members who might be interested in a new assignment that ensures that students do the reading that they're supposed to do. So why don't you tell us, what is the 3-2-1 Purposeful Reading assignment and what made you want to try it?
So the 3-2-1 Purposeful Reading assignment is basically just a tool that folks can use to help their students read. And I don't know if anyone else out there has the same problem, but for my entire very short teaching career, I've had trouble getting my students to read what they need to read. I tend to like to do a flipped classroom, and so I want them to come prepared with the reading before they come to class so that we can do some other things, so that we can kind of go a little bit deeper with the material, and so that I'm not lecturing or doing activities over the actual reading. And what I discovered was two things, basically. One is that the students aren't reading, and number two, that even if they are reading, they're not comprehending what they're reading, which is a problem because if you're not comprehending and retaining it, then it's really hard to discuss those readings in class. So I came across, just by accident one night, I was surfing the web looking for some other things and came across this really great activity called the 3-2-1 Purposeful Reading Report. And basically what it does is it makes the students be very purposeful in their reading, as the title suggests, but it also helps them retain what they're reading because it becomes a very active reading assignment instead of just sitting and reading a textbook and using a highlighter, which may work for some folks, but I'm discovering that with the millennial generation in particular, they're not really, that's not really for them anymore. So this assignment really makes it possible for the students to become very active in their reading. And what I'm discovering is that they are not only comprehending, but they're able to really critically think through some of these issues, particularly when we talk about them in class. So Robin, would you like me to just go over the form that they're going to have access to?
Sure, perfect.
Okay. So we're going to make available this particular tool for you. And I don't know that it's available right this second, but it will be very shortly. So it's basically just a Word document that we upload into Canvas. And with each reading that they have, they fill out one of these reading reports. Now, for this semester, I have them reading multiple journal articles. And so I just asked them to pick either their favorite one to do the report on, because doing 5 or 6 reports is just not feasible. And that's a really heavy workload. Or they can actually synthesize what they've read. And as long as they're listing what they're reporting on, at least I'll know what they're talking about when I see the report. So on the reading report, they have their name and the date. The date is important because I'm requiring them to have these forms into Canvas 48 hours before class. So I teach on Tuesdays from noon to 2:50, and I ask them to have them in by 11:59 on Sunday evening. The reason for that is because I want to go over them and see what they've done, make sure they've done what they're supposed to. And also at the bottom, when we get to that in just a second, I use those for a class activity. And so I need to have time to get those printed out and to cut those out to get them ready for the activity. So they have their name, the date, and then the chapter number, or in this particular case, I have the journal article name and author. So the 321 reading report comes from basically section 1, section 2, and section 3. Section 1 is worth 3 points, and I'll tell you what that is in a second. Section 2 is worth 2 points, and section 3, you guessed it, is worth 1 point. So there's your 321 title. Section 1 says, after reading this chapter, which 3 knowledge concepts, ideas, or issues do you think are the most important and why? So to even answer this question, they have to have read the material. There's a note underneath there, and it says this: please paraphrase the information and ensure that the answers are no more than 100 words in length. So I'm really wanting them to synthesize this material. I encourage you to answer in point form or bullet point form, and the justifications for your choices are important and necessary in order to receive the full point value. So they can't just throw something down on the page. They really have to be critically thinking about what they read, what those concepts are, and they have to be able to report that out very succinctly. So section 2 is worth 2 points, and it asks them to do this. What are the 2 main concepts, issues, or ideas that you are having difficulty understanding, and how does this impact your general understanding of the chapter? So again, you're asking them to pull out the things that they really didn't understand, and discuss that. How does this impact how you did or did not understand this chapter? And I've gotten some very interesting answers on that. And you will get a couple of times, especially depending on the reading, where students will say, I got everything. That's okay. I don't count off for that, because if you've done your own reading, you know that there are some times that it just is what it is. So there may be some times that the students actually don't have anything to put there. So I try really hard not to count off on that, if that really is the case. There's a note under this one as well, and it says there may be more than 2 areas about which you have questions. You may identify all of them, but you must identify the top 2 areas of difficulty and indicate the impact on your general understanding of the reading to get the full point values. So I make them choose 2, and if there are other ones, they can list them. And then in section 3, which is worth 1 point, and this one has been the most interesting of the entire assignment for the whole time I've been doing this assignment, which has been about 2 years now. This has been the most interesting for me. Section 3 is 1 point, and it says, pose 1 question to the author of the chapter or the journal article, the answer to which will go beyond the scope of this chapter or the article. And the note under that says, you don't have to answer the question, you just have to pose it. And so what I've done is I've expanded this assignment just a little bit, and what I'll do is I'll print out section 3, the page that has section 3 on it. I will cut them out, literally cut out with scissors, And I have a bag that I put all of these in, and we have the students at the end of class or beginning of class, wherever it fits in my lesson plan, have them randomly pull out these questions because they're unidentifiable. I don't have the names of the students who've asked these questions. So they just pull them out of the bag, and then we ask them in class and we talk about them. And again, this is just another layer of that critical thinking that you can institute in this assignment to help these students really understand what's happening here. And I've gotten some very interesting questions out of this section that we've had a really good time answering. So that's the overview of that. So if you have any other questions or want me to go any deeper into that, I can do that.
So the students submit all of the answers to the questions via Canvas, the learning management system. Is that correct?
Correct. Everything is in Canvas. So it's being tracked, and we can do different things with that. But basically, it just helps me kind of coordinate all of those things, and I don't have a billion emails sitting on my desktop trying to figure out whose is whose. But yeah, I mean, and really, it's not a hard assignment to look at. It really does, as you can see when you get the form. It won't take very long for you to actually read through those things, and the reason for that is because I am asking them to be very succinct in what they've learned and how they're processing that material. So they're not writing you a 5 to 7 page paper every week. This really is just a very quick assignment, but it's a really good one to help you identify whether or not they're actually grasping what you're asking them to read.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about how this has worked in your class. You said a couple of times that you've gotten interesting results. Do you have any that you want to share with us? Tell us how it's working, and how has it affected the quality of the discussions that you have when you take those questions and you actually use them in the face-to-face portion of your class?
Yeah, so basically, because I have a very small class, like this semester I have 9 students, and I really like that because that enables us to know each other a lot better, and so the discussion tends to be a lot more robust. But certainly the questions that the students ask and answer of each other in this assignment are very interesting, and it really does create some sometimes very lively discussion. And one of the things, I do an evaluation at the end of each class, and one of the things that they always say is that there's not enough time for us to do all the discussion that we want to do, because what happens when you begin discussing those things with other people is that you not only deepen your understanding, but you understand where someone else is coming from, and sometimes you can come up with solutions. In my particular course this semester, which is human sexuality, we haven't really solved a whole lot of problems, but we certainly have been able to talk about what public health practitioners could possibly do to solve those problems. How would that look in the real world? Yesterday, we did a module on the health implications of pornography, and as hard as that module was for a lot of those students, they really begin to realize that there are some public health issues there, and that there are some things that as health educators we can do to help mitigate some of that, as we're thinking about what our interventions are going to be. So I think of all of the questions on that 3-2-1 reading report, that last one probably is the most important, because it's going to show you as a professor whether or not these students are actually really thinking through this material. You can ask a question that has already been answered in that article or that chapter, but when you start getting students that are actually asking questions beyond the scope of the chapter, that's when you really know that you've been successful with that, and that's what's been so exciting. But again, if you have students who don't really want to discuss things, this really is a good way to start that discussion, because sometimes students just don't know how to ask the right questions. They don't know where to start. And so having them think through that before class takes all the pressure off of them. All we're doing is drawing the questions out of a bag that they have already asked. So, if you're really looking for a way to increase the discussion in your class, I think this is a great way to do it.
So can you recall a specific question that a student asked from the latest one that you did?
Gosh, I wish I could. We didn't get to all of them yesterday because we had such a short class. A lot of them, it's very interesting because in general, I will just say this, a lot of them, because we're doing journal articles this semester instead of a textbook, a lot of them are asking very interesting research questions. Like, for example, in our sexual violence module, they asked, why did you only look at college men and drinking? Why didn't you look at college women and drinking? Things like that. Or why did you only look at alcohol? Why didn't you look at marijuana? Because that's kind of a hot topic right now. So that, that comes up a lot when you're talking about drugs, heroin, all of those things. So they really have been asking very specific questions about the research, methodology of what these studies have been doing, which I find interesting because they're able to take those methodologies then and discuss them in such a way that we're able to apply them to practice. So I always use the example about when we found out that peanut butter caused cancer, or that's what the word on the street was many years ago, right? And then several years later, we discovered that there was a flaw in that study, and peanut butter really doesn't cause cancer. And so I always use that with them and tell them, that's why you have to ask these questions. That's why you have to question everything. And I think a lot of them are questioning research methodologies, study designs, things like that. But they're also questioning things like, why aren't we looking at this particular social issue? Why aren't we looking at the economy? Why aren't we looking at historically what's been happening in our society and why we can't solve this problem? So they're looking beyond the scope of public health. They're really looking more at history, the economy, sociology, even anthropology sometimes. And so it's been really interesting to hear what some of their questions have been and what fields, other fields of disciplines that they're asking questions about.
So yeah, I find that really interesting because through all of my education, I was never taught to question research or analyze research until I started my PhD program. So I literally did not know how to do what you're having your students do. You're getting them started to a skill that they can take with them if they go further in their education. We also have Brian Hoff with us, who is helping. He's from the Center for Innovative Learning, and he's over there with Dr. Oden, and he's in a program right now, and he's doing those things. And we've talked about that before, how sometimes we don't know what we're supposed to be asking about those pieces of research. So I think you're giving them a kickstart in a good direction if they want to go on further with their education.
Right. And I think too, because public health is a practicing degree, the MPH is a practicing degree. And I think that when we're able to connect theory to practice, I think that's when you have that bingo moment in your class, that aha moment for your students. We can talk to them about theory all day long, but until they understand how that connects to the real world, it doesn't do them any good. We watch a lot of documentaries in that class that support the reading. So I pick the things that I show them via video on purpose to connect to what they're reading. So they're reading about a concept. We take them through an experience, through a documentary, or through an activity in class, and then we have this discussion. And many times they will find that the questions that they asked on the last part of that reading report are absolutely right on, that they are on track with what they're supposed to be asking, because there's nothing in the field of public health that's not fluid. We're learning new things every day. And so I think the other thing that this report helps them to do is helps them to learn to question things. If you don't understand what you're reading, ask a question, because that's how great discoveries are made, by people questioning things that they may or may not understand. And so you're really, I agree, you're really kind of giving them a kickstart into the world of questioning, why are things the way that they are, and why can't we make them better? Why aren't they better? Those types of things. So yeah, I love this report. I think it's an amazing tool to be able to use in your classroom. And I think once you use it more than one semester, you're going to begin to see, even anecdotally, some of the things that your students are learning and how much they're grasping. But I think when I do that evaluation at the end of the class, when my students say, I'm sorry, we just don't have enough time in this room to talk about all these things, I think you're on the right track, because they want to talk about them. And this is just a tool to help you do that.
So how you've implemented this assignment changed since the first time that you implemented it? Has it changed anything significant that you've changed about how you do it in the class?
Well, the main thing that changed this semester was that I started cutting out the bottom questions and using them as a class activity, because I realized as I was reading those questions that they're really good questions. And sometimes they're better questions than I can come up with. And I think that's fantastic. I'm fine with that. And so it really just kind of adds that extra layer to the activity level in the class that we do. But I think the other thing is that and I've also used this with undergrads too, by the way. This is a really great, I don't care who you are, if you're undergrad, grad, it doesn't matter. This is a great activity. But I have begun to realize that these students are beginning to take this pretty seriously. And it's not because they're getting a grade for it, because they do get a grade for it. But the level of work that they're doing and the effort that they're putting into it has really begun to amaze me. I have not had really any problems with anybody blowing this assignment off. They've really taken it to heart and they've done it very well. And I think that again, is just another layer that frees me up to be able to do what I would like to do in the classroom in terms of getting them to that next layer down in that topic. If I don't have to spend my time going over the basics, if they already have done that in their reading, then we can really dig into some of these issues and problems. And I think that's where the real learning is beginning to occur. It's not in the reading, it's in the application of the reading in the classroom. So for that reason, I love the flipped classroom, because it just really, for as little time as we have, it affords me the time that I need to be able to go a little bit deeper with them. And I think that's where you're starting to see the real learning occur. And I think that's the whole point of what we're doing is the learning piece. If you can really evaluate how much they're learning, then I think you've had a successful semester, which, I think that based on the work that you and I and Brian have done over the last couple of semesters, I think we're realizing that some of these things are really working well. So, I don't know if anything will change for the next time I do this class. This report is really strong as it is. And so I hate to go messing with something, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So I hate to go messing with it. But again, I think that one of the better things that I've been able to do with it is to take those questions and be able to use them in the classroom as an activity.
So I'm just curious what percentage of their grade this assignment counts for?
Oh, wow, Brian, do you remember? I think it's like 15 or 20%, because they do have a semester project that I have weighted pretty heavily. And so, this doesn't, while you would think that 15 or 20% is not a whole lot, I have had it make or break some students' grades. Students that either don't come to class or don't turn it in for whatever reason. Like I said, that's only happened to me once or twice, but they really do take this seriously. So if they don't, so I usually try to do 10 or 11 of them so that I can drop at least one and have a good grade for 10. And then I use that as an exam grade. That's kind of, class participation / exam grade, whatever I need to use it for that semester. You can use it for whatever you want to. But it doesn't sound like it's weighted a whole lot, but when you really look at the greater scheme of things and you've got 10 grades there that are being averaged for one, it really can, either raise them a letter grade or drop them a letter grade, just depending on, what the other grades are in the class. So I try not to weight it a whole lot because I have other things that need to be weighted a little more heavily. But like I said, it's weighted enough that it can really affect their grade if they don't do it.
So, can you see this assignment scaling? What if all of a sudden you had twice as many students in your class? What would you do then with an assignment? Any ideas on that?
Well, there is an extent. Actually, yes, Robin, I do. We have what we call the Purposeful Reading extended process. And that basically is you're going to use the same form. Okay, so you're going to basically have them do the same thing. So unfortunately, if you have 80 students in your class, you're going to have 80 reports. But again, they're short, so it doesn't take a whole lot of time to go through it. But there's another activity that you can do, which I have done this a couple of times, and it's a fantastic activity. And it includes opportunities for group discussion and peer teaching, which again, I think is a really, really great pedagogy to use to help students deepen their understanding of what they're learning. So it has 7 steps. I'll just go through these pretty quickly. Robin, just stop me if you have any questions or we need to clarify something. So the first step is in class, the students you've assumed they've already read. The students are assigned to groups of 5 with a group leader and a recorder or a scribe. Their first task is to come up with a consensus on the 3 central issues or concepts or facts in the reading, and then they post that on a flip chart paper or just chart paper. So that takes usually about 15 to 30 minutes of your class. Next, the students share with their group 2 aspects of the reading that they didn't understand. So you're probably going to have out of that group of 5, you may have 10 ideas. I'm guessing you're probably going to have at least 5 because some of those ideas that are shared may be the same thing, and that's okay. Once all of the problem areas are identified, then the members of that group are challenged to help clear up these areas for each other. And this is providing a really strong peer teaching opportunity. So if person A says, I didn't understand XYZ in the chapter, but person B does understand, then they have a chance to help person A to understand what XYZ was in the chapter. And again, you're going to get this form. It says it usually takes about 15 to 30 minutes to do that. Then step 3 is the groups are going to review the question that each student came up with to pose to the author, and they must agree on the most interesting one that should be asked. So again, you're having them discuss all of these things together. You've got this peer teaching opportunity, and they have to come up with the most interesting question that is going to be asked when the group reports out to the bigger group. And then number 4, the instructor will lead a review of the top 3 from each group and will extend the debate if necessary. Now, step 5 is as a whole class, students begin to work through the problem areas with the instructor who has prepared a presentation based on the responses gathered from requirement 2 of the 3-2-1. So that was the requirement 2 was the 2 aspects of the readings they did not understand. Okay, so now you're starting to address the things that they say they did not understand. When peer teaching has been successful in this group, the individual students who were helped by the other group members review the problem solution to enlighten anyone else who is still unclear on this concept. So again, you've got another layer of that peer teaching that's helping them really solidify what they're learning. So, and in this particular professor that came up with this concept says this: in these cases, I have experimented with bonus marks to the group who has solved a problem identified by their group members and can help members of another group to understand it. Those bonus marks can be whatever you want them to be. Again, you don't have to do that. It's just another incentive for those students to really. And then step 6 is the class continues to work step 5 with the instructor until all of the problems have been adequately addressed, which again can take a minute or 2 if you're really doing it correctly. So as you're doing your lesson plan, you're going to want to think through how much time you want to contribute to this. But certainly, if it's a difficult topic, it would be a good idea to use this process throughout the entire class to help the students teach each other. And then 7, after the class, the instructor poses each group's question to the author for the student's interest. And I am suggesting that Canvas is a great place to post those questions in a discussion thread. And it also says this step could be extended to a search by students for articles relevant to the questions. So again, if you wanted another deep learning piece to this, you could have the students do an extended search and find the answers to those questions via a literature review, for example. Mm-hmm. This particular process really has proved successful in a course with 80 students as it has in a class of 15. Obviously, the larger student numbers, or the larger the student numbers, the more time is required to be able to do that. So depending on what your topic is, what track you're teaching in, you may want to consider how this is really going to practically work. But this is one of those activities that I love to do with larger groups, because if you break them down, if you have a class of 80 and you can break them down in groups of 5 or 6, it makes the class, I think, a lot more fun for them, and I think it makes the learning a little bit deeper. Typically in a class of 80 students, it takes 2 classes of 60 minutes to fully complete this activity. So considering the fact that we teach for 2 hours and 45 minutes, you could actually complete this whole thing in one entire class period. The time taken for this full purposeful reading activity is similar to or slightly more than this particular professor says she would assign to a more traditional lecture punctuated by questions and discussion. So it's an issue of taking that traditional lecture and kind of breaking it down and creating a new format for that lecture. So you can still get your lecture material in, but you're just going to be doing it in a different format. So the complexity and the lengthening of the reading will also dictate the time that you're going to need in class. So the impact of the activity on actual learning far outweighs any concern about the time required for the 3-2-1 process. And I would have to agree with this professor on that. She's absolutely correct. The time that you spend with these students doing these things really is a simulation of practice in most cases. And so, you can set it up any way you want. If you want to call them interdisciplinary teams and they're discussing this case, we do that in the real world. I did that as a medical social worker for a really long time. And so that is a very practical thing that you can have your students do that is just as close to practice as you can get without, putting them out there in the real world and having them do that with an actual team. Mm-hmm. And she says in one of her courses, she assigned the 3-2-1 reports to the text chapters that she thought were the most difficult and which did not have any direct connection to the course lab activities. And a lab can just, she doesn't mean necessarily clinical lab, but just laboratory simulations, for example, just like the experiential learning cycle that I use in my class, we do activities. So you could call them just course activities. And she says in total, 7 reading reports were required in the course, making it manageable for both the students and her to make excellent use of class time. Now, I will say this, I use the reports every single week. The students are required to turn in every single week. So typically on any typical semester that I'm not traveling or have to be at a conference or something like that, they're turning in, a good 15 of them. And then I can decide whether or not I want to drop 5 or 3 or 2 or none, depending on how you want to run your class, to get that final grade, either for a class activity participation grade or for an exam grade. And most of my courses, I've actually used it for an exam grade. So that's the extended version of that particular tool. And I think it's a great tool. I think that if you really want to learn how to flip your classroom and have never done it before, I think this is a good introductory way to do that because it's all written out for you. The students have really mostly done all the work, and all you need to do is just go through and help them and really just facilitate the process for them, help them narrow down the questions they want to ask, and then just facilitate the discussion with the questions that you have off of section 3. And it makes it a really, really great classroom learning experience.
I agree. Thank you for that very complete description of the extended process. I could see where this could take the place and make a huge difference rather than having just a self-check on reading or a multiple choice quiz. Could actually, right. Those readings could actually be extended to be, as you said before, connected to real life and made more meaningful to the students. I'm all for anything that instead of a multiple choice quiz to check on reading because, we don't want them to just read to pass the tests. So
right, and I will say this, before I started using this, I was doing weekly reading quizzes, which was a lot of work for me because I had to create them and then I had to give them and I had to grade them. And I'm not saying they're bad. I think that they do have their place. But what I have found out, at least anecdotally, is that the 3-2-1 reading report has been a wonderful substitution. And in fact, I think has created a deeper level of learning because those reading quizzes were only 10 multiple choice questions. They weren't tricky. They weren't difficult. I just wanted to know if they'd read, but that's all it told me. It didn't tell me whether or not they were actually learning anything. And that's the point of us being able to teach these students is to have them actually learn something. And so I have found that, even though the 3-2-1 reading report is a little bit more time intensive to grade, not much, but you still have to you have to read everything and you have to look a little more closely at it. It tells me a lot more than what those reading quizzes did because all those told me was, okay, yeah, they did read, but what did they read? What did they comprehend? What did they understand? And what did they learn? And so I think you'll find that if you're a fan of the reading quizzes, I'm not saying give them up. I'm just saying give this process an opportunity to work for you and see if you can't see how much more learning your students are achieving by using this process.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. I can't wait. I know a couple of faculty members that I would like to suggest this to try in their class instead of those individual multiple choice quizzes. So
right.
Let's see if we have any questions from our audience. It doesn't look like anybody's posted any so far, but you've been very comprehensive. I think you've answered how long it takes to grade and how do you grade it. And you told us about your rubric, and we know that we're getting copies of it. let's just wait just a minute and see if anyone has any other questions.
Absolutely.
And I'm not seeing any posted. So with that, I think we will go ahead and wrap up. And remember, anybody who's viewing the recording or viewing live, you can go to the URL that is in the question section and watch the recording. And also we will post all of the related materials that Dr. Oden discussed. And I want to thank you so much, Dr. Oden, for coming and talking to us about this. I'm really excited about going. I wish I was teaching right now so I could go do this assignment with my class, but anyway.
It really is great. I encourage everyone to at least try it because it has just been such a wonderful experience for me. And like I said, I've been using this about 2 years now. So I highly recommend that you at least try it.
And thank you to Brian for his technical assistance over there with Dr. Oden.
Yes, thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm going to close the broadcast now, and we'll see you at the next Teach and Share, which is going to be on April the 6th. And it's going to be on interactive question and answer activities in the classroom of a different kind, using games and things like that. And if you go to the Center for Innovative Learning website, you can find out more about that. I'll make sure and post that on our materials as well. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.